Hi and welcome to the Black Mambas talk. I'm joined by Simon Jones from Helping Rhinos, a registered charity who run the sponsor the Black Mamba project. Can you tell us a bit about the Black Mambas, Simon, please?
Yeah, hi Safeena. So the Black Mambas are based in the Greater Kruger Park in South Africa. They are South Africa's first all-female anti-poaching unit, and they started with a team of just 6 individuals, and there will soon be 42.
Wow.
So their area of operation has expanded significantly in the 5 or 6 years that they've been operational, and we've seen huge success that they've had. I mean, it was a real new phenomenon at the time, and aside from the significant media interest they got worldwide, the reason they got such interest was because they were actually achieving. So, within their area of operation, they focused on everything that was poaching, from meat poaching and collecting snares. The number of snares they would collect when they first started was incredible, as well as being a frontline presence and in terms of anti-poaching. There's lots of people talk about the fact that they've had lots of publicity that they're unarmed, and certainly we've had lots of questions asked, shall we say, around sending these women unarmed onto the front line of what's an increasingly violent war zone. I mean, just this week we've had a ranger in Kruger Park itself being shot by poachers and he didn't survive. But the idea of the Black Mambas is not for them to be the anti-poaching unit. They're a cog in that wheel.
Yeah.
So they're that first line of defence. When they find signs of insurgents, then they radio for the armed backup. As the gentleman who set them up, Craig Spencer, often talks about them being the sort of equivalent to the old-fashioned English Bobby on the beat. So they're links to the community, a visual presence that's backed up by the armed support units.
So why women?
Well, it was, I mentioned Craig just now, it really was his brainchild. So he'd used many different and perhaps more traditional methods of anti-poaching, and nothing was completely really working. And his mindset was, we have this hugely underused resource in terms of women in Africa, and actually, how can we find a way to really engage them? So that was the first thing. How can we use this resource? What we really found is that these women have a huge commitment to what they're doing, a huge passion to what they're doing, and really 50% of their role is also going back into the community. Many of the Mambas themselves have children. We've got many examples where one of the members could be supporting 8 or 9 different family members just from their salary. So in addition to the significant impact that they've had, and the numbers we're talking about is, reduction in poaching within their area of operation of, up to 63%. But then the impact back in the community as well, changing the role of women and empowering women more within the community has been phenomenal.
And how do people view the Black Mambas, like the male counterparts?
So when it first started, it's fair to say there was a degree of scepticism. Why are we sending women out to do what traditionally has been a man's job? But as you can see, from going from 6 to soon to be 42, and the success rates that they've had, that has changed.
Yeah.
And people know that the waiting list that Craig and his team have for new members to come and join the members is incredible, and I think testament to the success that they've had, not just in the anti-poaching but in the sort of socio-economic environment and the impact within the communities.
So what does it take to be a Black Mamba?
That's a very good question. It takes a lot of guts. If you just think about what they're doing, they're operating, the patrols are running sort of 24 hours a day, particularly at full moon, which we call a poacher's moon, because that's when traditionally the poaching has been the worst. So they're out there in a big 5 game reserve. So not only have they got the threat of poachers, they've got the threat of being on patrol in the same place that elephants lions, rhinos, are all inhabiting, and they can come in the corner. So you talk to some of these women, and when they first start, they're actually more afraid of coming face to face with a lion than perhaps they are with a poacher, because that's probably going to be more likely. As I said, their role is more about prevention, finding the signs of insertion. So they will, 20 kilometres a day checking the fences along the border area, looking for signs of insurgents, footprints, spoor as we call it, that's come in. So it takes a lot of guts in the first place, a lot of commitment. As I mentioned, a number of these women have children at home, and their shift patterns are 20 days on site, and then 10 days sort of away from their families for 20 days of every month. So it takes a lot of commitment, and they have to, they really believe in what they're doing.
Yeah. Okay, so you are the CEO of Helping Rhinos. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
And why I'm here talking to you about Black Mambas. So Helping Rhinos, as you say, is a registered charity here in the UK. We also have a registered branch in the US. And our model is very much trying to form partnerships with people out in the field. So rather than have everybody doing everything, our model is, okay, you guys are very good at this, so let us take some of what we're good at and traditionally you're not so good at, which is things that the guys in the field like, the fundraising and all of that. And so we can take all of that, frees up more of their time to do what they're good at, and hopefully we can generate more funding by being here in the UK. So we partner with them, we run their sponsor Black Mamba schemes. So there's a number of different initiatives that we do to help raise funds for them, and really just try and then be there, a representative for the Black Mambas here, because while we have brought some of them to London in the past, it's not feasible for them to be here, and every time somebody wants to hear from a Black Mamba in London. So I accept the fact I'm not an African lady who's patrolling 20 miles of fence a day, but obviously we work very closely with them, so hopefully we can give an insight to people around the world, and give an understanding of what they do, and hopefully help people understand what role we all have to play no matter where we sit in the world.
Yes, I mean, how can people help? Like if you're in London, say, or if you're watching online, and if you're anywhere in the world, how can people help?
Well, I mean, there's so many different ways, from the traditional fundraising, getting involved, understanding what different skills people have. The conservation world is unfortunately a very small world with very limited resources, both human and financial resources. We acknowledge the fact that not everybody's a millionaire and can write us a check, but so there's different ways, from simple things like sponsoring a Black Mamba, that contributes to that and becomes part of a bigger thing. Talking to us, and you can also, Transfrontier Africa, who run the Black Mambas, they actually have a volunteer program out in Africa, so you can go and volunteer. You don't actually spend time in a camp with the Black Mambas. You'll probably be pleased to hear if you see the huts that they live in, but it is very good and inspiring. In fact, Safeena, I think you've been done a volunteer program.
I went there. I volunteered for 2 weeks in May, and everything. It was such an incredible experience. Like, I was not picked up from the airport, but they arranged for me to be in a motel for one night. Then there was a shuttle service to Balule Nature Reserve. You get to go in bush camp. To be fair, it's a bit basic, but it was brilliant. Everything, it was safe as well. So there's you get your own room. You might share with one person. The food is incredible. Like, they cook it on a campfire, and we did drives every day. So I did something called rhino monitoring with a lovely Leonie, and I got some of my own. I got some of the best pictures taken. Like, I'd never seen a giraffe before, and I've got this. There's every picture and elephants and stuff. So for me, as a photographer, that was brilliant. So I wanted to take back what I learned and what I captured to kind of leverage it for like wider issues. But I did go with the intention of meeting the Black Mambas before I left. And I met them a few times, and they're incredible women. They're brave, they're beautiful, and they're just fearless and focused. You know, they really love what they do, and to them it was just a job and a way of life. And then we come from the outside, or I came from the outside, completely in awe, but they just get on with it, and I think that's amazing. So if you do want to volunteer, if you do want to go to Africa, it's South Africa, and do a volunteering program, I'd definitely recommend it. And South Africa was on my, not to visit list. So it will change the way you see things.
And I think there are lots of volunteer programs out there, and it's fair to say some are better than others. And and what's good about the Transfrontier Africa volunteer program is that it actually is one of those that makes a difference.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there are a number of them out there that are just a modern day ecotourism channel of generating funds for private reserve owners, but this is good. You do really get to feel what the conservation side, what conservation is like in Africa. As you said, the accommodation is fairly basic. There's no electricity. The bathroom is very interesting. You have to walk through camp to get to the bathroom. There's no roof. The walls are this high. There is a shower, but I don't think anyone really ever uses it. But it gives you a really good feel, as you said, in a safe environment of what being in Africa is, and you do get to meet the Mambas, and you get to have some amazing memories. And of course, the money that you spend to go and volunteer at Transfrontier Africa gets all put back into their conservation programs.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. I think.
So that's the key. Coming back to how you can help is, that's one channel of it as well. It's not practical, and it admittedly, it's not for everybody as well to go and live in a fairly rustic environment for a number of weeks. But what I would say is come and chat to, whether it's people like, us or other organisations, because there are things that you can do in this country. We have a number of people who are running the Royal Parks Half Marathon here in London, for example, in October. We have people doing, renting out, or not renting, being donated space in cafes, and doing a day of cake sales and giving all of that back. So there's various different things you can do that can help to make a difference.
So does anyone have any questions? Because I could go on.
What does a black mamba do if a lion comes round the bush in front of her and stands there staring at her? What's the next thing that happens?
Okay, well, I've heard it's happened a couple of times. So I guess the first thing we should say is that as part of their training, as much of the anti-poaching is how to survive and operate in a big five environment. So what do you do if a lion comes around? The one thing you'd never do is run. So if a lion comes there, the first thing you should do is really just stand still.
Yep.
And take what happens from there.
Act
if the
natural.
lion looks down, you can kind of back away slowly, but never turn your back.
Okay.
If you turn your back, that's an invitation to the lion. So,
right.
To come and jump on your back, and it's not going to end well. So they go through all of that training, and it's no different to training. It's whether you're the same training that a field guide or a ranger gets.
Stand still, back away. Anything else?
Stand still, kind of. Don't look it directly in the eye. Be passive towards it.
Look a bit sort of down.
So got to look away. Yeah. If the lion walks towards you, then stop. If the lion stops, then walk backwards.
Okay. And that's all you can do.
And that's look at that. But when you're out in the bush anyway, it's not just lions. So you should always be looking at a safe tree or somewhere where you can get to and climb. And and your course of action is different whether you're an elephant comes at you or a rhino or a lion.
Because lions can climb trees, can't they?
They're not the best climbers, not as well as leopards.
Okay, fair enough.
But the other thing to remember is, 9.5 times out of 10, the lion's probably going to be more afraid of you and will be looking to see, how it can get away. It'll be trying to get away from you unless it's particularly hungry, and you're not going to know that till it's too late.
Okay.
Considering they're facing dangerous poachers and dangerous animals, how come they're not armed? And also, when you say they're traveling 20 clicks a day, is it on foot or on a vehicle or what?
So on foot. So they set off about, I'll come to the first question last, but so they literally walk up and down a fence patrol. So the patrols are on foot during the day, and at night they are in a vehicle because it's just not safe to walk around the reserve in the pitch black at night. And there's a few reasons for that. Obviously, if they're on foot, they can be much more observant in terms of what they're looking for in terms of spoor footprints and holes in the fence, etc. And some of that fence just isn't that passable in a vehicle either. So it is on foot. We've looked at other possibilities of trying to look at push bikes, and but at the minute that's kind of the best option that we have. In your first question,
Well, dangerous animals, how come they're not armed?
how come they're not armed? Okay, so I mean, for facing the poachers, I mean that's the biggest question: why they're not armed. So, given what they're doing in their patrol, they're on that fence line, which is fairly open, and the poachers again don't want to be seen. They will try and avoid if rangers that are coming through. So their job is really to look for signs rather than to be out there and entering into a gunfight. There's also a mindset change going forward, and you'll come across different people who have different opinions on this. But we are creating, whether it's through poachers coming in and being killed by rangers, or whether it's being killed by whatever it is they're trying to poach, or whether we're actually capturing the poachers and locking them up. We're creating environments where families are losing often, the figurehead of that. So that's not a great way to engage communities and get them involved in wildlife conservation. So a big chunk of what we're trying to do is empowering local communities to feel a greater part and be a part of wildlife conservation. So creating that environment where we are out there causing hostility between the community and the people that are running the game reserves. It's trying to, how do we work better with them? So hence 50% of the members' role is back in the communities, trying to work on that side with them. So of course there's a risk, and as I said, there'll be other people that say it's a risk that they shouldn't be taking. But so far we've gone from, as I said, from 6 to soon to be 42. We've not lost any. We've not had sort of gunfire at the members, because that's not the role that they're playing. And again, if you go back 20 odd years in the UK, when we had the British Bobby on the beat, he was the guy that was out there in the community building relations. He wasn't armed. If something happened, then he would call in the armed support unit. So that is kind of the mindset and the model that we're trying to implement to try and build those relations with the community.
And is there still a ban on ivory in England, or is it okay to actually buy ivory now?
So there's been this ban on ivory that predates if it was sort of more recent ivory. There is a consultation which is finished by the government now, which is looking at banning all ivory. So we are looking to try and get that ban on all of ivory pushed through. But the ivory obviously is elephants. When we talk about rhino horn, so it's very different to the ivory. So ivory on an elephant is obviously essentially a tooth, it's a bone, whereas rhino horn is keratin, it's compressed hair. And there is a complete ban on rhino horn. You can't trade rhino horn anywhere globally. South Africa now has a law where you can trade it internally, so it can't leave the borders of South Africa, but somebody can buy and sell rhino horn with the required permits within the borders of South Africa.
So are you involved in breeding situations, like increasing the breeding? Because I know it probably is very difficult. It takes a long time for a rhino pregnancy.
I mean that's the key. So you need to reduce the poaching, and we need to increase the breeding. Gestation period for African species rhinos, for black rhinos, about 15 months, 16 months. For a white rhino, they will only really have one calf. That calf will typically stay with its mum for about 2 to 3 years. So the breeding cycle is anywhere between 3 and 5 years for a single calf. So it's not like a dog that's going to have 6 puppies and and then next year I'll have another 6 puppies. That isn't easy. But you're right, when we talk about the population as a whole. So our goal at Helping Rhinos, we talk a lot about stopping poaching, and we talk a lot about loss of habitat. Our goal is to save the species of rhino, and we want to make sure that we do that. Now, the first step is to make sure that we have more rhinos being born than are being killed. Now, at the moment, the majority of rhinos are being killed because of poaching. So hence there's a lot of focus on poaching. So as habitat compresses, as we're finding in our pleasure tour, we're having to work to bring more land in it. If you get to what we would call a carrying capacity, then you need to find more land so you can continue your breeding program. So it isn't kind of a one size fits all. There's lots of different spokes to the wheel, and unfortunately we have to be focusing on all of the spokes, and just some are perhaps more important than others given the state we're on. I often get asked, what's our goal as an organisation? Is it stopping poaching? And I think I would be naive if I sat here and said our goal is to stop poaching. Of course, that's what we would like, but we're losing over 1,000 a year in South Africa, 1,300 in Africa as a whole. Our first goal has to be to reduce that level of poaching to a level where we're having more being born again than we're losing, and then we reduce it so we can set ourselves different goals that's, I guess, aggressive but achievable.
So how many are, if 1,300 or 1,000 are being lost each year, how many are being born? Fewer, but how many do you know?
Fewer, so what we call is a tipping point. So I can't give you an exact number, but it's slightly below that now. Okay. So if you take South Africa, you're just kind of below 1,000. So it's not like we're only having 200 born a year, we're losing 1,000. We're not quite at that stage. But of course, that risk is the more you keep losing over 1,000 a year, the population grows, so you're still losing 1,000 a year, but we've got less being born. So that gap will start to increase.
Yeah. Are any being born abroad and shipped in, or does that not quite work?
There are certainly runners being born abroad. If you look at zoo populations, you go on social media and you'll see rhinos being born in zoos fairly regularly. Are they being shipped into Africa? No. And kind of that's not the answer at the moment. The sort of the zoo population, if you like, is being kept as a genetic backup. So that if you do want to reintroduce them at some stage, you've got hopefully a diverse gene pool, and it can work. So another organisation, African Parks, has just reintroduced 6 black rhinos into Chad. Okay. You may have seen on social media. So here's an area that did have rhinos. It had northern white rhinos and it had black rhinos. As you know, we don't have northern white rhinos to reintroduce, but they've just reintroduced. There's 6 black rhinos back in an area that we wiped them out because of the state of the civil war within the country. There's an area now within the national park we feel it's safe to push them back into. There's elephant herds there. They've not had poaching incidents for a number of years, so they've got good anti-poaching methods. So we've taken that decision. So yes, we can reintroduce them, but there's a lot of work to do to ensure that where we're putting them back to is safe.
And if they've been bred in a zoo, perhaps they wouldn't be quite as aggressive or fend as well for themselves out in the wild. Yeah,
I mean, the ones that we've introduced to Chad, I should have said, have not come from a zoo.
Okay.
They've come from wild populations. With any zoo release, you wouldn't take an animal that's born in a zoo and just go and release it back into the wild. Typically what you do is you move it back into the wild, but it would still be in a captive environment, and then you would breed, and it would typically be 3 to 4 generations before you would put them back into the wild, because they have to adapt to the environment that they've moved back to. They have to adapt. They have to build a resilience to the nature of diseases that's there. So it's a complicated process.
Slow, 3 to 4 generations is a slow process in this case.
What unique characteristics do you think that women, because of Black Mambas, bring to the situation? That, I mean, obviously the social aspect, they're much more involved perhaps in the community, mothers, sisters, whatever. What other characteristics, or anything that you think is particularly pertinent?
I mean, from what we've seen with the ladies of the Mambas, their commitment to the job is unquestionable. I mean, they work for hours and hours, so they seem to have a fantastic work ethic. There is, I guess, a degree of passion in how they deal with things as well. So one thing that is put roadblocks up, and I think how they deal with people and they're stopping in cars is maybe slightly different to how the males of the community deal with that as well, and how people deal with them as well, because there is that sort of how do the males deal with the females and such like. So I think there's some of the key things: resilience, passion, commitment, and then empathy, I guess.
Where does the name come from?
So the Black Mamba obviously is a snake and one of the deadliest snakes in the area, and that's how they came up with it. They wanted to see its deadly force within the area.
Do you think that the Black Mambas, because you mentioned that they're treated like rock stars in certain instances, do you think that overall it's raising the profile of women in Africa, not just in South Africa first and foremost, but in general, because they're seen as a kind of superglue in some.
I think they've had a lot of. I mean, not just locally, but I think around the world. If I tell you that one thing, Craig had to employ somebody just to manage the media requests coming in because they had film crews there the whole time, a lot from America, I have to say. So I think maybe taking that concept of women there has helped. It'll be a very slow process of changing perception of women's role within the African communities, but it can only be a positive start within that process to have people seeing women and looking up to women as being a role model.
Any final questions? Really?
Hudson, what else can we think of?
No, there's so many visions that's starting.
Maybe Safeena, I'll ask you, what inspired you to, your exhibitions here at Waterstones? So what inspired you to go and take these photographs and then put them on the show?
Well, I saw the Black Mambas on social media after I saw the Kung Fu nuns, and I was working on a project about women warriors. So I wanted to explore what makes women strong, or what makes anyone strong. So when I found out that Transfrontier Africa were based in England, and I could go and volunteer for 2 weeks, so I decided both things were going to get done. I could take fantastic pictures. Well, they turned out better than I hoped. And also I have this exhibition coming on, so I wanted the exhibition to be bigger than me. So when I started to get in touch with charities and ask them if I could have access, and it didn't work the first 5 times, but they allowed me to have it. So this is just, we live in like one of the best cities in the world. I want people to find out more about important issues, and the world is bigger than your doorstep, and that's why I think you should go and volunteer, and you should take photos, and you should share whatever inspires you, so we can all make a difference. Even small differences make big differences. And so that's basically it. I just did it because I wanted to improve my photography, but I wanted to use it for something bigger than, landscape.
Yeah. It's interesting because one question came up, seems like a long time ago now, was how can people in London make a difference? And actually, here's something that we didn't talk about. Okay, you're a passionate photographer, wanted to go and experience it, and now on the back of that, displaying this, and I know you had the Kung Fu nuns as well, so it's not just the Black Mambas, but taking the opportunity to share your experiences and try and give people a vision into that world by just walking around a Waterstones bookshop in London is something.
For sure.
Yeah, when you don't really think about it. There was another story we had actually of someone else we worked with, a lady who now makes quite a popular jewellery line called Rhino Tears.
Oh yeah.
And she was out at a game reserve where a rhino had been poached and survived. And she was talking to her guide and saying, I wish I could do something, but what can I do? I don't have any skills, I don't do anything. to the guy who was talking to her, and she ended up saying that, well, I make jewellery. And he was like, well, there you go, make a line of jewellery. And she now donates the profits from that jewellery line back into conservation. And yet she was sitting there thinking, there's nothing I can do, I don't have any skills. It turns out she's snowed under now with different lines of rhino tears. So there are lots of different ways when you actually just have a conversation with people and come up with different ideas. And actually, maybe there's something I can do.
For sure. So I haven't been on the site, but you publish on the site the different ways that people, the stories like that, the different way that people have contributed in
we have different stories. We are adding more to our site of that all the time. So it's a work in progress, if I'm really honest, at the moment, in terms of publishing some of those stories. But you're right, those are things that will get on there that hopefully will inspire other people.
Exactly.
Sort of how can you get involved and just different ideas.
Yeah, because it makes it more personable and more approachable.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to go and volunteer, or you don't have to buy a fancy print, but you could buy a necklace or something that benefits yourself, or something that you can take pleasure in. It doesn't have to be just giving.
And I think what they found with the necklace and the earrings is people say, oh, that's very nice, what's that? And then that prompts a story, so you end up telling somebody as well.
Sure.
And of course, I haven't mentioned social media. I think we're live streaming this, but social media, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. If you follow people like us, then we've got a great team of people that are publishing updates as well, and keeps you up to date with what's going on in that environment and in that world. And again, we will publish those type of stories on there as well.
That's great. It's great to be a part of it. Thank you so much for coming. It's a real pleasure. And Victoria, thank you for making contact on Instagram. So the social media works. But it's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, Safeena. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah.
No, it's been wonderful.